Alright, so here we are. We are going to take the motor out of my grandfather's 1999 Chevy Camaro, and we purchased this for $600. It had 196,000 miles on it. The motor engine had aspirated water, and I believe that the head gaskets blew out. We were able to get it to start and run, and it was terrible. It was basically a giant fog machine that fogged up my entire neighborhood. So I tried to put some K-Seal in it, hoping that that might help the head gaskets, and it ended up locking the motor up. So we're going to take a look at what it takes to get this motor out of this vehicle. So in this first slide, you can see the motor cradle's coming down. There's 6 bolts that hold the motor cradle to the chassis, and then your strut tower bolts that come down. I ran into quite a few challenges. I did have to unbolt all the stuff from behind, all the U-joint saddles and the transmission mount bolts and the bolt for the transmission torsion arm, and the AC compressor. I had an issue getting to the back bolts on that, so I was able to do that by taking the passenger side tire off and holding the A-arm up. The exhaust was a little bit of a challenge. I was very lucky to get it to separate behind the catalytic converter. It did take a little bit of coercing with a hammer, but it's a good thing I didn't try to unbolt at the manifolds, because I'll tell you about that here in a second. This is a shiner I got while crawling around and trying to unbolt the rear of the transmission. I bumped my head against a block, and there you see the motor sitting on the cradle. I had to use a sawzall to cut the exhaust manifold bolts off because they were rusted so badly, but we're going to pull the motor off of this. So here's the motor and transmission. It's the 3.8 liter Series 2 motor with the 4L60 transmission bolted up to it, and I'm going to separate that transmission and start working on this torque converter. I don't know how at the time I was going to do that because the motor's locked up, but here in a minute I'll explain to y'all what we did to fix that. So here's the car with the K-member assembly back in place. I put it back on with the steering box back intact so that we could move this thing around the yard as needed. I don't know how long it's going to take me to rebuild this motor or search for a donor motor, but at any rate, I wanted the vehicle chassis to be mobile. And here is the transmission separated from the motor, and the picture on the right is what happens when you don't drain the transmission before you separate it. You get tranny fluid everywhere. I did take advantage of the tranny fluid. I threw my old rusty chain in there, and hopefully that'll help recondition it a little bit, and then we'll dispose of it in a proper manner. So to get this torque converter off, I ended up having to take all the spark plugs out, and you can see one of these spark plugs was severely damaged in piston 1. I think that's from somebody trying to jam it back in there. But I did spray some WD-40 and some top piston lube in the cylinders, and I was able to use a tire iron wedged in between the torque converter and the flex plate to get the motor to free up and spin. And then the bolts, there's 3 bolts holding that torque converter on, and you have to access them through the starter hole. And here's the torque converter off of the flex plate. Motor is ready to be tore down, and then here's what my shiner turned into after 3 days of developing. So, hey, we will do some more videos on this as I tear into this motor. I'll show y'all what we're finding, and we'll see if we can actually rebuild this block, or if I have to chase down another K-Series block. And we'll put it back in the Camaro and hopefully get my grandpa up and running. Thanks. It's been real.